Oh, there you go. It says,
Okay, cool, yeah.
the stream is live. We're live.
On the top right-hand side of the screen, you've got the comments section. So if you're going to click that, in theory, you'll be able to see comments as they come through from people.
Okay, and this little box here where it says you're in the show, everyone can see and hear you. Will they come up through there, or?
To the right of that, I think, on the right-hand side, there's another box which says comments. So as soon as someone puts a comment in, we'll see them. They should kind of appear, hopefully, and you can read them then. But we'll just go with the flow. Oh, I think I've lost you now. Okay, I think Alison's just probably pressed the wrong button, which is fine. So hopefully she'll rejoin again now. Oh, here we go.
There we go. Okay.
There we go. Cool, perfect.
All right. Comments. Yay.
Comments, brilliant. That's cool. So I was just going to say hi to everybody that's watching, basically. Obviously, I'm talking today with Alison. So Alison Hendricks is kind of one of our experienced certified practitioners that's been on the journey with us for quite some time, which is good. So you've got quite a few things to share, I guess, and stories we can talk about.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
so do you want to give a quick kind of resume about yourself, really, kind of so we know, or I obviously know who you are, but so the audience know who you are and a bit about your background?
Sure. All right. So my name's Alison. I'm 34 years old, and I'm from Kentucky, Western Kentucky. And I grew up there on primarily a tobacco farm when I was a child. We had about a couple hundred acres, and we had other crops, corn, soy, wheat, things like that. But I was always very connected to that land. We would work in the fields a lot, and my dad would bring in like handfuls of stone tools and arrowheads and all kinds of artifacts. And I realized when I was a very small child that I would communicate with those spirits that were still on the land, and that it wasn't necessarily something that everybody experienced. You know, we know that children are very open, but as a child, growing up in a very conservative area, I didn't really talk about it, and I didn't really get to expand upon the spirit world and what that meant in any kind of context. So it just kind of faded away for me. And I had a friend that she wanted to get into witchcraft when we were in middle school, and we did voodoo dolls and seances, and it kind of opened a lot of stuff up for me, and it felt very like muddled and not not fun, and not exactly something to play around with. So I very much shut myself off to all of that and just kind of put my head down and went through the world. Ended up going to college at Western Kentucky University in Bowling Green, Kentucky. And I started as a broadcast major. Really wanted to tell people stories, and was just fascinated with certain communities or people that didn't necessarily have a voice, and the ability to be able to bring that voice to a wider audience and bring awareness around it. And it didn't really pan out for me in broadcasting. It felt very much either you can go be a journalist and maybe end up like a POW, and you're not going to get paid, and it's going to be a very very rough time for you, or you can go the traditional route and you can be a newscaster or whatever and be very narrowed in what you can say and do with that. So I fell out of that, and I kind of just meandered about, into different subjects, and ended up graduating with an interdisciplinary degree with a concentration in health studies. So I took a lot of psych classes, psychiatry, psychology classes in college, and was always very fascinated with the mind and the study of consciousness and the study of human behavior, and that burning question of, well, what makes people do the things that they do, especially some of the more heinous, shadow aspects of humanity and society. So I always have had that working foundation of that psych educational background, and I moved forward after that in restaurants and worked as a server for almost 14 years, bartender, just serving. And around the time that COVID hit, I ended up getting a job working admissions or intake at a regional mental hospital, psychiatric hospital. So that experience, and I was there for almost a year, that experience really opened my eyes to how we treat people that are seeking mental health care, the conversations we have around it, what is really going on behind those multiple closed doors, and just walked away from that with the thought of we have to do better. We have to do better in some way, shape, form. We've got to we've got to start making steps in the right direction and do better when it comes to mental health care. So I ended up after that managing a spa for a few years and got to work very closely with different massage therapists, mainly, and that opened me up to the healing arts and what all was out there, and all the different avenues in holistic medicine that are available, and the concept, the idea of we have to treat the mind, the body, and the spirit equally, just as much as we treat the body, just as much as we treat the mind. We also have to have that spirit aspect to it as well. And got to observe and learn a lot about massage therapy and a lot about body work and a lot about what it meant to be a practitioner and get very one-on-one with somebody and be a part of their world and listen to their experiences and to cultivate the practice for being able to do that and to enter into that space on that level with people. And um, around January of or the end of 2022, my mom had a stroke, and I found out that she had brain cancer and she had an inoperable tumor, and she ended up passing away in January of 2023. So once again, the experience of continued to bring my awareness around how are we treating people that are mentally vulnerable? How are we treating people that have physical problems that are severely affecting their mental state and their spiritual state as well? It all comes down to that awareness of consciousness and making the effort to do better with those people that are disadvantaged, that are vulnerable, that are wide open, right? Because we talk about a lot about being open or being protected. So that compounded on that experience. And I would say with the other events that were going on in my life, if most people are probably familiar with what the dark night of the soul is and what that means. So I was experiencing that personal journey. And around that time that all of this was happening, I was recommended Michael Newton's books, Journey of Souls. And then Dolores Cannon's name popped up. And it's like, oh, well, there's this other lady too that she's talking about this stuff. And, I've always been fascinated with parapsychology and the paranormal. And I've always been a very avid reader. So I dove into those books. And around the time that I dove into those, Laura was popping up on social media.
She does, basically.
Miss, lovely Miss Laura Starr. She was popping up and saying some things. And I was like, wow, like she gets it. And she's talking about stuff that nobody's talking about. And she's, um, you know, holding this space for even just these ideas of some of this stuff to come up and cultivating the discussion around it. So I really honed in on her podcast and listening and absorbing and taking in everything that was going on in that space. And then you popped up. So
As we do generally.
as you do.
So
So
up until that point, you hadn't really had any interaction with anything negative per se, like entity based or discarnate spirit, or was
well,
it
it's
more?
funny. It's funny that you would ask that. I could speak all day on those experiences. Around the time that my mom had her stroke and was in the hospital with her brain cancer, and things were happening with this business that I was running, and things were happening in my personal relationships as well, primarily my romantic partner. And the building, the spa that the building that the spa was in was a historic building. It was built in 1931, and with everything that was happening in there energetically, with the clients coming in and out, and I think to the history of the building itself, because I dove into that once these things started happening, where spirits were showing themselves to me in the building, and for the first time since I was a child, that had opened back up for me, and
So
I started.
what was the catalyst for that, Alison? You know, when you hadn't seen spirit for all of those years, from childhood to kind of, you know, not long ago, I guess. What do you think actually happened that kind of brought that back online for you?
Honestly, as typically, it's a combination of factors, right? Whenever it's kind of like an algorithm with everything. But I would say the main catalyst for that was I started uh, using psychedelics very heavily. And whenever, just to be honest and forward, I've always been an advocate of cannabis, and what it can do for people, and the medicine that comes with it. So as I was having this dark night of the soul, as I was having all these things that were happening around me, I did start to delve into mushrooms very heavily and acid very heavily, and those experiences just blew everything wide open for me. And I had
That was
had an
almost like kind of crown chakra open. Here's
yes,
the spiritual world, basically.
yes, like top to bottom,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
I had had experiences when I was in college with heavier doses of mushrooms, and had those isolated experiences with them for whatever reason, though, at that time, and it didn't open me back up to, the spirit world the way that it did then. So I think it was that. It was my mom passing away and dealing with her death, and learning even more about the states of consciousness and what was going on with her, and what had maybe been going on with her for years. And I think her passing was definitely a very large contributing factor. What was going on with her, because it started before she passed, but now that she has passed, that even stronger connection with the spirit world,
Yeah.
having
Comes in.
such a close family member. Yeah.
So obviously, as part of that journey, so you obviously listening to Lara, reading things, kind of. So it's having that appetite, isn't it, to find out what's happening behind the curtain, I guess, and that's kind of where most of us, can kind of align with you really, because when spirit come knocking, generally, obviously, especially on the sort of path that we tend to be on, then it is quite a turbulent time for most people. So were you finding it was a quite a turbulent path at that point, and you didn't really feel in control potentially of what
Oh,
was happening and how?
absolutely. In that time period, like I said, it did feel very much like all of these things are happening around me, and you almost get into that disassociative state and that autopilot state of taking a step back in yourself and observing and watching and thinking like, okay, what is going on here? So it was very turbulent. With my interpersonal romantic relationship, there I tell people I fully believe that at one point he was possessed, for sure, if not multiple times. So once
Which is
again,
which is always good fun, talking to someone that is possessed and obviously has other things talking through them is
yes,
obviously, it's generally quite a frightening place to be, really. I'm just going to say hi to Erin, Hope, and Laura that have popped in. So hi to you guys.
hello.
So what kind of symptoms did you encounter then for your, obviously for your partner being possessed or having sort of possession-like symptoms? Was that kind of eye
Uh,
color changing, kind of personality changing?
he um he was not the first person in my life to approach me and say that they felt like they had a demon in them or that they were possessed. Um, I
So
had
he
experienced.
he did know that himself then?
Yes, he would refer
Yeah.
to himself as the many one.
Okay.
And at one point, to stay on topic here because I will go all over the place.
The big conversation, yes.
At one point, he had a full-blown psychotic break and was running around my house with a gun after he'd ran around his house with a gun. Eyes fully black, speaking in accents from the time period that the building that he resided in was built. So that is when I had called a mutual friend, and she is very mediumistic. She was somebody that also helped to kind of open the door again and show some different modalities or different pathways for divination and stuff. And she was like, I don't know what to tell you other than just to get out of proximity, because at this point it's a very dangerous situation. She had a couple of friends of hers that had went through similar experiences and ended up taking their own lives. And she asked me if I knew what gang stalking was. And I was like, no, I've never heard of that. And that sent me on another rabbit hole journey. And I learned about, that there are people out there and that truly are being stalked. They call it gang stalking. I'm not sure where the term originates from, but when you think gang, or gang stalking, like people envision like, oh, okay, well, there's these guys on the street that are, following you around or trying to rough you up or whatever. And when we talk about gang stalking, like in the spiritual context, it is this idea that these negative entities are attracted to somebody. They have opened themselves up wide, whether it's, extreme trauma, hard drug abuse, whatever the situation is. And they experience these entities come through people or come through even devices like phones and radios and things. And it creates this pervasive feeling of being watched constantly, being harassed, because there is a book called The Devil Beside Me. And the lady in that, she talks about her journey, how she was never open up to any of this stuff, and that this started happening to her. And she had no answers, and she didn't know what to do or where to go because nobody was talking about it, and nobody believes you when you say, hey, like, I think my neighbor, I think there's a demon in my neighbor, and he's saying mean things to me, and he's harassing me because he wants me to move out, and or just being targeted is what they call it, being a targeted individual. And so to wrap back around to answer your question, that that's where the awareness needs to come from, of people are dealing with things that they don't understand, and we have to approach it from that blank slate, that openness of, hey, we have been there and there's nothing that you're going to say, or there's nothing that you're going to share where we're going to scoff at you, or we're going to turn you away, or we're going to invalidate your experience. Whatever is happening to you is very real. And to watch him go through that experience, not only as an interpersonal relationship level, but also on that observational experience of mental health care and what is really happening right now in the consciousness, and what's happening in the spirit world, in the astral realm, that's unseen, that is heavily affecting our 3D reality. I think that's where the disconnect is that there's a wholesale denial by our medical systems that the spirit world would affect our physical world. So to finish that story, I ended up calling his dad because we had a relationship. We were able to, talk on the phone and stuff. So I called him and I was like, hey, you need to come get your son. I'm very sorry that this is happening. I don't know what to do. And he came and got him, and we split paths very shortly after that because, it became very dangerous for me,
Yeah, of course,
as
you've
it
got
was.
children, so, with children in the house is it, even it's a bigger concern, isn't it, at that point, really?
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, while this happened, my children weren't here. I'm fortunate enough that a lot of the uh, outlandishness and the events happen, while they're not present, and that's something I have taken notice of, and they do carry that protection around them. So the ability to be able to, like I said, bear witness to these experiences and then say, okay, what is this teaching me, and what is this teaching us collectively, and how do we take this experience and move forward from it? Because to my knowledge, this was like a year and a half ago that this happened, and to my knowledge, I don't think he's gotten any help in any form or fashion. Personally, I refuse to call the cops or call any services because of my experience on the other side of that, working in the mental hospital. I knew that that wasn't the best path, and that wasn't the safest path for people either, because when you're dealing with a citizen or an individual that is in that open state of crisis where they are very consciously deep into the spirit realm, the astral realm, the lower astral plane, even when we talk about, shadow people and gang stalking and hearing voices that compel you to do certain things. Um, whenever, you know, whenever we have those people, medical intervention usually does not make it better. Because
Yeah, it's
those
quite
people are
an
not
experience, isn't it, really? I was just gonna say,
exploitive.
Mike,
Exploitive? Is that what you said?
it's quite an experience, basically, when
Oh,
you're in that state and you kind of don't know where to turn, because that's
yeah.
quite a statement. I mean, you're making a statement that's really interesting because you worked in mental health on the other side, helping people. So for you to say, I wouldn't send them in that direction is kind of a really interesting thing to observe, I guess, from our perspective outside. I'm just
Yeah.
going to say hello to Jono, Maria, and Lara that are watching. So hi guys, thanks for joining. So I guess from that point onwards, so is that where you kind of, so where did you kind of find out about SRA and what we were doing? Was that from Lara's podcast and the
That was
conversations that
from
were
Laura. Yes.
kind of
So
happening?
all of that had happened, and I was kind of spinning out looking for something to grasp a hold to, because I've never been a religious person. Even though I grew up in the very conservative Christian area, my parents didn't go to church. So I was afforded the opportunity to be open-minded when it came to religion and spiritual practices, and went through my own phase of being atheist and anti-theist. And that's when the big dose of mushrooms early on in college opened that up. And then, every time the doors just get opened up a little bit more and more and more. So to have worked there and then to say, I wouldn't send somebody there, or I wouldn't recommend it. It's not that the people there are in any way, form, or fashion not good or not well intended. I think that 99% of the people that work in the field are well intended. Everybody's doing their best. Everybody's doing the best they can with what they have. It's just being able to pull out on that opposite observational level and look at it overall as a system and say, okay, statistically, when somebody needs this type of help and they go here, when they come back, they are not better. The experience ends up being more traumatizing. And it's interesting. I thought you said exploitive a minute ago, because that can be what it feels like whenever you are dealing with people that are so very vulnerable and so very scattered and fragmented. And then when they come in the door, because of the way our systems are designed, you have to look at them from that patient aspect, from that client aspect of, well, how are we going to get paid to help you?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Because that's the
So
whole thing, is that the financial statement comes before the actual help, really. And I guess that's kind of what I guess that's why we all do what we do every day, because we know that the spirit world is impacting people from a mental health perspective, and people that are possessed and people that have possession type symptoms and problems, unless you remove the spiritual source, which we know is entity based or discarnate based, or all of the other things that we talk about and look for, we know that if those sources aren't cleared and removed, then that person really is going to struggle to have any type of recovery, certainly long term and short term, I guess, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not to say that in certain situations that type of treatment is not needed, but overall, systematically, like you said, whenever somebody is experiencing those symptoms, if you enter into those traditional spaces and constructs with traditional physicians, they're going to say, you're absolutely wacko. And
Basically, yeah.
yeah, and here's a pill, and maybe here's another pill, and we'll get you some more on the way out, and hopefully that makes whatever it is go away. But really, I don't even feel like it's a band-aid. I feel like it exacerbates the problem when it comes to the negative entity attachments, because it's just those medications are so powerful, and they're just opening more portals. So it really is a case by case risk benefit analysis with every individual as to whether or not that traditional treatment is warranted, and if it's going to help them, and not only help them, but help us as a society overall.
So I think that's the whole thing, that you framed it really well. I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? That, at the moment we have people that are having spiritual experiences that are negative, that the system and science and the medical industry won't talk about. And we all know it's a spiritual problem. And we also know that people do suffer with psychotic episodes and schizophrenia and things that isn't or it cannot be spiritual as well. So we know that our kind of protocol that we use and our intervention works. And we know that works 80% of the time. So for every 10 people, our stats tell us that 8 of those will feel better. Maybe the voices may not stop completely, but there'll be impactful, positive change for 8 out of 10 people. And 2 people probably have got other problems. And what we do maybe doesn't have such a positive influence. But it's a conversation that we really need to get into with society. We really need to be having with the medical profession and pharma, really, because I know big pharma is all about selling drugs and medications, but I think as a society, we've taken our eye off the ball, that we're supposed to be helping people. That's kind of why we do what we do, and it's kind of what pharma was designed to do from the start, was to make people better. And if you're not making them better because you're not accepting some of the conversations that we can have from a spiritual perspective, then we're a long way off kind of the kind of the remit that we've got and the agenda that we should be working to collectively, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about, coming from that intention and that basis of wanting to help, sometimes those drugs and those moments, they do give people that moment of reprieve. And that's really what is needed in most cases, that SRT provides on the spiritual level, is that moment of reprieve, that moment for that person to be able to catch their breath, to look around and say, okay, what's going on? There are people here that want to help me. How do we allow in that moment the conversation of somebody to be treated in the best way possible for them? And I think that is what is most needed right now. Is just the conversation, just the doors open, just the idea of maybe there's a better way that we can do things.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's one of those things that, again, lots of these different things should work together. Like, we as a spiritual kind of team or organization should be able to dovetail into the medical profession and scientific as well. And we should be able to help people. So we perform clearings, we remove entities and detach the negative influence, that we know that intervention works. And then there still can be the requirement for pharma substances to help people with their mental state and how they feel, and anxiety and depression. So we kind of know that it's not a one pill fits all. But if you look at the dovetail of a wider type of practice, where you're actually having spiritual intervention and medical intervention at the same time, and pharma intervention and therapy, those 4 things together, would produce a lot more healing in a very fast way
Yeah.
for for the end user, effectively, that is the person that is psychotic. And I think the problem is, from our perspective, the way we see things, I guess, and frame things, is more and more people are having these experiences. And like you said, in the States, you guys run around with guns. So someone that's having a kind of mental health experience, or they're possessed by negative entities and they have a live gun, it's kind of not a great thing, not a great place to be for anyone else, really. And I guess we're seeing
Absolutely.
more and more of that. And I think that was
Yes.
kind of part of the reason that, when I spoke to Jono, well, we spoke about creating Spirit Release Academy to start training practitioners like yourself to give you the skills and equip you to be able to provide intervention for these sorts of people. So I guess
Yes.
from my perspective, so when you first kind of found out about the way that we do things and the way that SRT, or Remote Spirit Release, RSR, provides intervention, and I guess Dr. Palmer, what was your kind of appetite to kind of join and find out how we work and what we do? Was it kind of, I'm definitely doing that, or was it, I'm interested, but kind of, this is quite new and I'm not really sure how I
It
feel
was
about that?
it was definitely the enthusiasm, I'm doing this, and the way it all came together, as far as the way my personal events unfolded, and then learning more about, you know, Dolores Cannon and Michael Newton's work, and following Laura. Once you once you came on the podcast, I was actually sitting in my car while my girls were in a little class, and I think maybe at that point I even only seen Laura, and I was like, "Oh, okay, like who's this guy?" And what you were talking about, and everything everything that you were saying, to me made so much sense. And I was like, "Okay, here's somebody that knows what they're talking about, is not afraid to talk about it, and recognizes the need for the change, and is making very big active steps to be part of that change." So whenever it was released, oh, you could go do this in-person course in the UK. I was like, okay, let's do it. Let's go. And people around me in person, in my relationships, they were like, wait, what are you doing? And why are you doing this? And is it a scam? And that kind of pressure of, like, when you do step out to do something so non-traditional, at least to the people around you, you do get that, the line of questioning run down. And I told people, I was like, I'm gonna go, and if anything, I'm just gonna get to be in a room full of people for a week that I can speak openly with, and I can feel like I'm not crazy, and that I'm not the one that needs to be.
I think that's a really good point as well, isn't it? That all of us in these rooms, when we speak to each other, we've all been through, quite negative spiritual experiences generally that kind of pushed each of us into that path, or we've all had experiences with substance or drugs or mushrooms or something that opens you up, and you start to see in that astral layer, I
Yes,
guess, and we realize there are lots of things that we, as a society, don't talk about, and it's kind of, it's conversations you can't have with normal people because they've been so programmed by the system to think
yeah,
that if you're talking about aliens, you're a complete lunatic. But you think, well, we are aliens, aren't we? Because
yeah,
obviously, you only have to look at the pyramids and look at the inscriptions and things, and the detail is in stone, basically, that there have been other species here, and we've kind of been manufactured from those. So when I
yeah,
started to kind of look at that, I realized, I started to wonder why I hadn't picked up on it for like 30 years of my life. I couldn't believe that I'd been so well programmed to stay
yeah,
away from the truth, really. And then when
yeah,
you realize that these entities are about, and they exist, and they control just about everything, and they're having such a detrimental impact to people's mental health, it's like, we need to kick their ass, basically, and
yeah,
we need to basically skill up and get the information out there as to how we bring ourselves back to a sovereign state and
yeah.
protect ourselves from these experiences, really. So when you kind of turned up to the training, what was your kind of experience during that week, in kind of your words, I guess?
Oh, I mean, it was fantastic. It was just, when I came back, I told people, I was like, it's just the best group of people. Everybody is well intended. Everybody wants to help in the way that they can. Everyone is eager to learn and to share and to change that conversation and change the narrative and help. So just the experience of getting to spend a week with like-minded people with a common goal to be able to make those connections and the networking, because everybody likes to say it's not what you know but who you know, and there's a lot of truth to that. So I think it is important to make those, for me personally, to make those in-person connections and to walk into that network, because when you're sitting in that room and you or Jono was leading everybody through that meditation, especially a protection meditation, you can feel yourself linking up mentally, spiritually, with everybody in the room and building that network. And then being able to move forward in the world knowing that you're a part of this network that's here to support you, that these people know your story, they know your journey, they're open-minded, they're healers, so they're willing to listen and guide you, even if it's a personal thing and not a work-related thing. So, yeah, just lots of fun and
Yeah, and of course the week just goes by so quickly, doesn't it?
yeah, yeah,
From my
that's
perspective, I know Johnny will say the same. When we walk in on Monday morning, we meet all of you guys and everyone's new. The next thing you know, basically, you've kind of taken a breath and it's Friday, and you
yeah,
guys are on this massive high that we've been kind of pulled along with, really. And
yeah,
then everyone's kind of, sort of, I guess, depressed about leaving almost because you've been with these like-minded people, as you say, locked in for the week and kind of lived and breathed conversations that you probably never had with other
yeah,
people, certainly not family and friends for most of us, really. So it is a very kind of intimate environment spiritually to be in, that you're able to say things that you would always collectively kind of siphon, I guess, from that perspective.
yeah, absolutely. It's it's about team building and network building, and when we talk about being sovereign and being solid in your sovereignty and having that confidence to move forward in the world, it's makes it a little bit easier to do that whenever you have a network of people behind you that are doing the same things, that have the same goals. Because I will have a thought sometimes of like, oh, I'm getting pretty out of sorts, and like, oh, maybe something's got a hold of me, and then just the thought of Chen and you and Jono and clicking into that network and like, oh no, you're fine. Like we're all here. Everybody's here. We didn't go anywhere. So
I
even though
think
we're
I
spread
think it's
apart.
one of the really important things, isn't it? That and again, a lot of these things are kind of new things to us. When we kind of started SRA, and John and I talked about what we could do and how we could do things, it was more about kind of continuing the training, and teaching people to use these techniques that kind of we developed together with sort of Dr. Palmer over the years, that kind of thing. So it's more about trying to skill people up. We weren't really considering the kind of community aspect that came with it, really. And certainly the way that you guys connect behind the scenes, because obviously, myself and John were talking about different things every day, and we're trying to progress the academy from a kind of roadmap perspective. And then we look behind, and you've got this kind of massive team now of people that are all interacting, and everyone's got each other's backs, and it's quite humbling, really, from our perspective, to kind of look back and see that behind us, really, because it's not what we were expecting. We were expecting just to kind of run courses, train people, and kind of keep
Turn us
keep that
out.
ship, keep the ship moving forward, really. But what you see
Yeah.
behind this kind of extremely tight group of people that all, as you say, the minute someone says I'm not feeling great, they get kind of descended on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And with that too, having that having that team and having that network of like-minded people, when you it's so important because we've all experienced in this work or in our personal lives on this journey the deep isolation that comes with going through these things or bearing witness to these things, or even if you're not being affected on a personal level or having experiences, if you are somebody that works in a mental health field, or even just the regular medical system, EMTs, military service people, all of those people that maybe even if they're not spiritually attuned or aware on some level, that those experiences can be so isolating, and to feel like you don't have anybody to talk to about them, or to feel deeply afraid that if you do talk to somebody about them, then they're gonna lock you up, like you guys call it section. We call it, we call
Because
it
that,
just,
'cause that is the scary thing, isn't it? That we actually
yes,
lock people up. The people that are having a spiritual experience that we know from our perspective we can resolve in 5 minutes or certainly within an hour quite easily if we perform an intervention. People that we could really, really help and take that spiritual psychotic experience away are then locked up. It's kind of like it almost feels to me like we've gone backwards, really, from a kind
yes,
of species perspective. So, like the
yes,
human species have gone back to the old days, really, where you were kind of stoned for saying the wrong thing, or we kind of burnt witches at the altar. We're
yes,
taking people that are having a spiritual experience for whatever reason, and we know we can deal with that and we can work with it, and we lock them up. And all we do
yes,
is feed them a whole load of drugs so they can't walk. Because I've been in mental health establishments and I've seen the people in there that are basically scuffs, like shuffling down the corridor. Their eyes are kind of spinning. They don't know what day it
yeah,
is. They're so medicated. They can hardly do anything really. And you think that isn't a treatment and it's not an
no,
intervention. You're basically, it's quite barbaric, I think, in the way that we do
barbaric,
them.
yeah, that's the word.
Yeah. And also you've worked in mental health. So what would your kind of conversation be with people like yourself that work in mental health and they see this every day? Do those practitioners and people that are doing their jobs, do you think they realize that there is a spiritual source to most of these problems, or are they just in the system and don't really understand exactly what they're kind of observing and being part of, I guess?
It's an interesting question. I would say that it is split. There are people in the field that are very spiritual and they work within the medical system parameters, but they do have that awareness of what's really going on. In this area, it's going to be predominantly Christian people because that is where we live. But in that sense of operating from that standpoint of religion or spirituality, then the other side of that is there are people that are atheists or they're just very clinical, private people, and that is the system, and that's the way, and that's how they operate. And there is, I think it like anything, there's a spectrum. You're going to have the people on one side that are spiritually attuned and they're religious, maybe even, and they're aware and they weave that into their work whatever way they can. And then on the other side of that, you have the clinicians that are very strictly, atheists and don't believe in anything outside of those medicinal parameters that they operate within. And then you've
Hey,
got,
hey, you know what we should do, Alison? We should
huh?
get them to do mushrooms, and then they'd be out on the astral and they'd see all these different entities and energies.
Yes,
And we should take all these clinicians that have been programmed and trained by the system not to believe in anything spiritual and say, look, here's a box of mushrooms. We'll see you in a few days. Let's have a conversation once you've kind of been out on that astral plane. Because that would be
I
such a cool thing to do.
I absolutely love that, and I wouldn't even send them away. I tell you what, I get set up in my farm in Kentucky, and they can come on down, and we'll do mushrooms for the weekend, and you
Yeah, you'd
know,
have Laura there within 5 minutes.
yeah, exactly. So, and have those important conversations. So, yeah, the other thing with that too is and people will tell you that work in these sectors that you develop a dark sense of humor because you have to have some sort of buffer or separation from the very traumatic and intense things that are going on a day-to-day basis. So you do kind of, you get that inkling of dark humor, but at the same time you want to maintain the utmost compassion for those people. And I think that was what I noticed when you talk about it, being barbaric, is that somewhere along the lines we lost our compassion. And for whatever reason, we think that the way that we're treating these people is compassionate. And it's just it's not, like you said, it's brutal. We're not that far removed from lobotomies. We still do chemical lobotomies. We still do when we were talking earlier about being so heavily medicated, the term for it that we have is called being snowed. And when you get somebody and they tell you, oh hey, well we snowed them, that means that they gave them powerful tranquilizers and sedatives to the point where they will be unconscious for, anywhere from 12 to 36 hours.
Right. And we still electrocute them, don't we? We still actually do
Yes.
mental electrocution. You think we do that on cows. Like, why would we ever be doing that on humans? It's unbelievable, really, to think
Yeah.
that is still the kind of method of intervention that society think is okay for people that are just basically having a spiritual experience that is very easily rectified from our
Yeah.
perspective, certainly.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. So yeah, there is. I saw it like once again from that observational awareness standpoint. Maybe that is just the journalist in me still alive. That to take a step back and look at it and see what's really uh, going on a different level. And when you talk about these people that are in crisis and potentially dangerous, even if guns aren't involved, people would ask me, Allison, how did you do that job? How did you work there? Were you not afraid to go meet people at the door? Because that's part of my job was to go, and most of the time they were coming in from the hospital and they were on a stretcher, but not always. And I would meet them at the front door and like, okay, this person's been accepted in the facility. And I would take them with me and we would go, behind multiple locked doors and sit down with them and explain to them what was going on. And um, most people, 99% of people that were walked through the door, showed up there, were so very desperate for help. They were so very desperate for some sort of reprieve, somebody, something to pay attention and just to try to help figure out what was going on with them and to get them out of that point of, critical.
So, in your opinion, what do you think was the actual source of the problem for most people that were having that experience? Was it kind of substance drugs? Was it kind of
Yes.
trauma? So drugs, basically.
I would say my personal opinion is that we as a culture and as a society on this planet right now, we live very traumatic lives. There's lots of trauma that happens to people when they're children. So all of that trauma, even birth, you think about the Western system and that conversation has finally evolved where things are changing, but unnecessary C-sections and unnecessary medical hospital intervention when you're, in this vulnerable point having a baby, and bringing the soul into this physical realm. Um, so whenever you have those people, and sorry, I'm my ADHD is going crazy right now.
I mean, we've all got
Um,
ADHD one way or another.
yes, yes. So, what was the specific question?
I was just saying, from your perspective, what was the actual source of the problem? So, kind of drugs,
Okay.
really. So people
Yeah.
kind of doing substance things, because I guess drugs blows the spiritual protection. We know that talking to the spirit guides that review someone's etheric field, someone that's done class A drugs or hard drugs has lots of perforations in their
Yes.
field, and those
Yes.
perforations allow entities and other things to come in and connect and basically use telepathy to talk to that person. And this is
Yes.
where the kind of intrusive thoughts and the AV auditory voice hallucinations, all that kind of stuff comes in from that broken field, basically, that is there for our protection. So
Yes.
that is
And
that's your opinion as well, really.
so, yes, I think our fields get very broken either in the womb through maternal trauma, the way we come into this world, the way our medical system treats, childbirth and mothers. And then even early on, as from a young child, it seems like this battering of trauma, like everything trying to get in. And when you have the conversation about the ACE score, it's adverse childhood events. So, we look at those things of before we even get to the point of drugs and substance abuse, what's going on. And they may even have been born to, mothers or even fathers too, that it's in their genetic code as well that have struggled with substance abuse. So I think that the way our 3D reality is set up, that we are very vulnerable and have a lot of traumatic events happen to us as children. And then that creates those openings for the substance abuse, but it also creates the openings to be not sovereign and to be controlled and to be exploited and to be used as a resource, as the powerful, beautiful, wonderful humans we are. The awareness around everything is grabbing for our attention because our attention is so powerful. And when you have somebody that, has been heavily traumatized and their aura is just beaten and perforated, then becomes very easy for them to fall into, addiction, even if it's not just substance abuse, addicted to destructive behaviors, substances, adult content, or even just, like I said, even outside of all of that, just a depressed life that's not their own. And that's where, we come in, and that's the conversation that's so important around sovereignty, is that once you get people sovereign, these people that are, we're not born into this world sovereign, hardly any of us. And everything, just attacks that sovereignty, that your auric field that is your protection for your sovereignty. And then as adults now we have an entire population walking around wide open and probably controlled either through different substances, whether it's hard drugs, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's, even a poor job where that's their existence and that's their life. They've given up their sovereignty completely and have accepted that this is their existence to, and that they don't even know the power that they hold, and they don't even know that there is another way. And we can hopefully give that moment of reprieve so people can say, hey, okay, maybe there is another way. And we can get them moving towards sovereignty, and we can get them moving towards having a whole, solid auric field, so that their life is their own and they're not susceptible to, the pull of substance abuse or other things. But in
That's
this
a
area,
bad thing. But for most people, it's self-medication, isn't it? For most people, because of
always,
what they've been through. So it's the traumas and life problems they've had pushes them to self-medicate and become addicted to those sorts of things. Because we always kind of say, Terry used to always say, it was the window of opportunity. So
yes,
when we provide intervention and we basically clear and remove everything negative that's connected to the client, we give them this window of opportunity to get themselves back on track. So the mental state and the clarity of mind obviously comes back. The thoughts, the feelings, anxiety, some of the anger, the negative emotions, all of that is kind of cleared and removed for a period of time. And that person has this window of opportunity then to try to make some better decisions and change their life, I guess, really. So
yeah.
when you started to actually perform the protocol on your clients, obviously from not really understanding it before completely, what's been your kind of opinion and experience of how easy it is to do and the effects you've seen on clients that you've intervened with?
It's fantastic because it is immediate, and it is interesting to the observation that we've made that even before a practitioner physically starts to do the process, or maybe even before we even turn our attention towards that client on the spirit world, they've already reached out for help. So the spirit team, because they don't operate within the constructs of our time here, they are already doing the healing work and they are already working on that person. And then we go in and we, give that focused attention to that person, give them that, opportunity for reprieve, and the results are astounding because they they have that awareness of what that clarity feels like now. And that's something that I know you've talked about at length, and what I experienced too whenever because that's the other thing, is I did a clearing with you probably a couple weeks after you were first on Laura's podcast. So it's like, oh, I definitely need this after all the other demonic thing, negative entity things that have been happening around me. So to have that experience of reaching out for the help, because that's the first step, and then knowing that it's on the way. And I couldn't sleep that night because it was nighttime for me. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I felt Chen enter into my house, and I got a little nervous because I was like,
There's a short
hey,
Chinese man walking about.
yeah. Well, I'm upstairs, sleeping, and my girls are sleeping next to me, and or like I said, I'm supposed to be asleep. The girls are asleep next to me, and 3 o'clock in the morning, I feel this presence come in, and it was very much this like uh, idea or thought of just lay down and go to sleep. It's fine. We got it. Like everything's gonna be okay. The very like comforting, like almost like putting a blanket, like tucking me in, like it's fine. We're here. We got it. And what the takeaway from that though was that moment of clarity of knowing, okay, this is what this feels like, and having that reference point. That's what's so important for people, when it comes to like the networking, and even the networking within their own mind of where do I go, or how do I act, or what do I do, when we can give them that point, that network point of, okay, this is what this feels like. And now they know, and they want to strive towards it. And when it's off, they know when it's off, and then they can reach out for help before it snowballs into a bigger issue.
So I think that's the thing as well. I think you framed it like really, really well. The wording and the way you've explained it, because the intervention is so fast. When the guides come in, my understanding of how that works basically is they kind of look for your core frequency of vibration. So if you're vibrating at like a certain number, like 10, anything that isn't 10 that's in your field is negative basically, and they just clear the whole lot out. So it's almost like kind of, these spirit guides come in and just rip out everything that's negative. And then you wake up in the morning with energy. Most people, clarity of thought, the mental state's different, and you kind of feel, well, I've had it, as you say, most of us that are doing this work have experienced it, which is why it pushes you to want to do it. So was that your experience? You're going to wake up the next day and think, I've never felt like this ever in my life before.
Well, I do have alchemic, or I do have points to pull from my own personal experience, with those psychedelics, having those very, you know, outstandingly high vibrational experiences. Not that they've all been like that, but so to have that reference point, and to have already known at that point in my personal life that there were things going on, because I can jump back real quick with that partner that was under the hard drugs, and in that building with the spa, it used to be a jewelry store. There was a 10 by 10 concrete bake vault in there, and they used to make and sell jewelry. And there was a ring molding that was found in there to make rings, and it had the devil on one side, and it had the Karen on the other side. So, that was just like a piece of that energy that was going on around me, and that I was embedded in. This area that I live in Jeffersonville is a hotbed, because it was capital of the slave trade at one point, over in Louisville. So a lot of underground railroad stuff, a lot of that residual energy from that evolved into this being Little Las Vegas. So lots of, when you talk about entity attachments, like
Right.
what
Yeah.
what more powerful and out there that compels you to gamble. So all of that energy, surrounding me and everything, and with this area as well, that's where a lot of the hard drug use comes in. Um, so it all kind of, goes hand in hand. When you can pull back and you can look at it from that perspective, you can make those connections. But for me personally, I had known what sovereignty felt like, and I had different experiences and points in my life. It was more of like testing the waters, and honestly, like the legitimacy, because that's what it comes down to for people. They're like, even if you're enmeshed in this world, you still have your doubts. So
Yeah, of course. I think being skeptical is a really good thing, certainly in the
yeah,
spiritual area. I think
yeah,
skepticism
absolutely.
is something we should promote really, and people should be skeptical, because until you've tried things, you don't, because someone says something doesn't mean it's real. And these days, you can't believe anything that you
Right.
see. Well, you can't believe anything you hear, and you can't believe anything you see either, really. So we're kind of in that world now that, you have to experience things yourself. And I like to say skepticism, I think, is something to be promoted spiritually, really.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was skeptical and I booked the session and felt Chen come in, and after that I was like, "Oh, hey, there's something to this. Like it works." And I'm very interested in being a part of that, and that's how
I know
all that.
time's ticking on, but it's been a great conversation. So where do you see yourself? I've shared your website. So obviously you've got a new website now that's kind of online, which
Yes.
is soulsourcesrt.com, I believe.
Yes.
Yep. So that's kind of a new website that you're just releasing, and I'm assuming you've got a Facebook page of you as well. But
I do. Same.
yep,
Yeah, same thing.
same
Soul
thing.
Source
Yeah.
FRP. Yes.
So kind of where do you see yourself going with this? Are you looking to kind of dive into that mental health area and kind of help the people that you were working with, or what's your kind of like roadmap? I guess I'm interested to know.
I love scalability as an entrepreneur and growing up, with my dad being an entrepreneur and running the farm. I am of the same mind as you of how many people can we help? How many people can we get in front of? Where can we start the conversations? Where can we plant the seeds? So for me, the SRT is just another, not just another, but is a very powerful tool that I have in my toolbox to be able to help people and navigate them towards that. As we know, doing this work, the path kind of just unfolds for you, right? So
Basically, you don't really pick yourself, do you? Kind of get,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you
So
kind
you
of
just
get driven down it.
that was the other question that came up was, how did you choose this? Or I'm like, it chose me, and it
Yeah.
really does. So
And I
I'm
think that's an
very
interesting way to frame it, because John always says that. He always says, "Do you feel like you've been called?" So we don't really think that, we don't go about to sell training to people. We offer training courses for people, but we never really. Everyone we talk to says, "I'm called. I know I need to do this." It's
yeah,
not a case of, we as an organisation trying to sell something and get people to do it, and then we kind of just disappear. It's more
right,
like we want to do it because people know, for whatever reason, this is on their path, and it's part of their journey, and they
yeah.
kind of need to be on that path, really. So
Yeah.
it's interesting you say that. I've just noticed your daughter is obviously in the comments as well. So Brittany popped up to say hi. This is my mum, so she's obviously quite proud of you,
Hello.
which is cool. I was going to say hello to Agata. She's always in, and Brittany, and obviously Jono's listening online, which is cool as well.
I think real quick too, just to go back to the conversation surrounding like the psychedelics and not just the hard drug use that opens you up, but that psychedelics do open you up. And there's a fantastic book called by Daniel Pinchbeck, and he goes around the world and he goes through all these shamanic, psychedelic, youth to adult initiations and rituals. And you know, kids are going to do this stuff. We're not gonna, we lost the war on drugs. We're not gonna be able to keep this stuff out of their hands. So I think it's super important that we bring this awareness to the kids. And when you talk about, the future path and everything, it's absolutely relevant that I have these small children that are, aware of more, aware of the spirit world and the things that mom does as far as this work, and knowing, that they're going to be okay when I send them out into the world. But there's so many kids out there that they're not even looking to self-medicate as far as like depression or pain with hard drugs. They're curious. They're curious, and they want that initiation. They want that experience. They want that medicine. And it's so paramount that we get this conversation in front of as many people as possible, so that way when these kids do, decide to take 6 grams of mushrooms, then whenever they come out the other side, that there's support and there's people that are willing to help, navigate and protect them from the negative aspects that can come from an experience like that being opened up.
Because it's a really important point. I think is obviously people are going to do, drugs and substance recreationally, because that's kind of what we do, and teenagers are in that world, aren't they? And that's part of what we are. We're human, and we like to be inquisitive because it's part of our makeup and part of our DNA. So, like you say, rather than trying to stop people doing things, that isn't going to work. But trying to educate people to say that if you're going to do a trip and you're going to take some drugs and things, do your protection first. Protect yourself spiritually, because you are going to go out onto that astral vibration and frequency, and there are things in that space that aren't particularly great, and they are going to kind of connect with you and ruin your life if they can. But if you're in a protected space and you kind of know what you're doing, even theoretically, really, from a kind of spiritual protection sovereignty perspective, then that trip could be so much more positive that you actually come back without anything that you didn't leave with in the first place, which I guess is a goal that you've talked about. And I think it's quite an interesting thing to say, really, is that at least if we can educate people before they do drugs on the weekend, just put yourself in your spiritual bubble, connect to your guides, use your intention to set the stall that you want to be protected, and then go and have the great experience on the weekend. And then on Monday morning, book yourself an SRT clearing just in case.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So to kind of wrap this up, I guess, so have you got any like a message you'd like to kind of share around spiritual protection and people sort of self-help, healing themselves from your own perspective?
I think the most powerful and important thing that we have in our toolbox is the word no. And a lot of it comes down to boundaries. And there's a lot of discussion around boundaries collectively now, even just in the context of like interpersonal relationships. So I think to expand that to the spiritual realm of that is what is most important is boundaries, saying no. If it's not an absolute yes, then say no, because anytime you say yes or anytime you put yourself in those situations, it's what creates, the openings for things to come in and will latch on and then they'll drag you down. And the so the word no and boundaries, and then also that sovereignty is our right as humans. And there's a lot of things in this world and a lot of programming that we'll try to convince people of otherwise. But as human beings walking this earth, you have a divine right to be here. You have a right to exist. You have a right to experience your life. You have a right to be joyful and to have a good life. And, that comes from being sovereign. So that's what we're here to help. That is the mission, is getting people sovereign and teaching them how to stay sovereign so that their lives and their power and their creativity is their own.
Perfect. I think that kind of frames the whole chat really well, actually, which is cool. And of course, you're a journalist kind of by trade, so I guess
Yeah.
there'll be ways that you can kind of get that message out to people that would be, quite helpful. So from your perspective, you're available to be booked for SRT appointments, or because you offer other things as well, didn't you? I'll just check your website.
Yes.
Do you want to just give us a quick kind of list of the things that you do offer, so if anyone's listening that wants to connect and talk to you or book a session, they kind of know where to go and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. You can always reach out to me. Even if something is not on the website, you can reach out. We can have a conversation. I think you can book just like a 10-minute consultation chat with me to figure out what is the best route, the best modality for you. We're always going to recommend SRT in the beginning because, like we talk about, it is that moment of reprieve. It's quick. It's the paramedic aspect. We're going to get in and we're going to clear you up and give you, hopefully that time, that space within your consciousness, within your field to have clarity. And then from there, I love exploring all the different healing modalities that are out there. So personally, I'm more focused on Reiki. I do Reiki in person, and then I also do distance Reiki. Reiki was something that came up for me after my mom passed away. I learned about it and worked with a few different practitioners, and I'm working on my Reiki master certification now. And I absolutely love Reiki because it is so pure and the intention behind it is always positive. It never hurts. It always heals. So it's a great kind of aftercare to an SRT. It's just to do the Reiki as well. and we can do that distance, and that helps to just infuse more of that healing energy into you, more of that positivity, more of that like I said, if you're booking and clearing, you're already asking for it. So the spirit world, your spirit team is already on it. So that Reiki is such a wonderful complement to SRT. And then I also offer dream interpretation because I've always been fascinated with Carl Jung's work on dreams, and always knew there was more than society makes of dreams. So I think dreams are very important. They're powerful glimpses into our subconscious and into our spirit as to what's happening, and can kind of help guide us and give us direction on um, what in your life in the 3D needs attention. So very focused on the dreams, very focused on the energy healing, uh, and they all, like I said, they all go hand in hand. So it's about helping people not only just get clear for that minute, but putting them on the path of healing and finding those modalities that fit with them.
Perfect. I think Reiki is probably one of the most undervalued healing modalities that's out there, really. Because I kind of did Reiki, John did Reiki. It's lots of healers start with Reiki, and then you kind of move on to other things. But you kind of don't kind of realize how powerful Reiki is when you're actually doing it and the effect it has on people. And I think the dream thing's really interesting, because I kind of never was really into the dream thing. I just kind of thought it was just this subconscious creating this crazy story every day, basically, that doesn't really mean anything. But now I kind of, I really analyze my dreams. So when I get vivid dreams, I know that they're coming from spirit. So it's Chen, my guide, basically giving me the kind of heads up that there's something you need to pay attention to. And I'll get the same dream time and time again until I actually start to listen, basically.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
So it's a message, it's not a dream, really.
Yeah,
and
I love that.
It's taken me a little while to get that, but I kind of got that now. So I think it's really cool that you kind of offer that as a service to actually take people and walk them through their dreams and what that intuitive messaging means, and how it's going to change their life, really.
Yeah, symbolism is everything, and learning to interpret those symbols, and just the idea that there's always more going on under the surface. And it's interesting when you talk about reoccurring dreams, because I had one for probably a couple of years leading up to coming to SRT, where I was in this like cobblestone kind of outdoor shopping mall, and there was this huge cobblestone clock tower in the middle, and in the dream I kept going up to the tower, and I would go into the tower, and there was this little bald man in there, like running around with glasses on, and running around like shuffling all these papers. And in the dream, I kept going in here, and I kept talking to him, trying to get him to tell me what it is that he wanted to tell me or was trying to tell me. And it was always nonverbal. And then whenever I went to the SRT, and then I saw Dr. Palmer's picture, and I was like, it's him. And,
that's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's the cobblestone clock towers all around. I don't have very many recurring dreams, but that was one that I had probably half a dozen times, to the point where I was like, what? What?
So that was the kind of nudge, basically, that, Dr. Of course, Dr. Palmer by then was probably already in spirit, because he's been dead a couple of years now. So that would have been him basically kind of guiding that dream state for you from spirit, effectively, which shows you that messaging is very, very clear, and lots of clarity around where you need to be for whatever reason. And of course, half the time, we don't even know where we need to be. We just kind of get guided into certain places, and then things open up for us. So
that's it. Absolutely. Yeah. So it sounds like my next venture is doing retreats for physicians and giving them mushrooms.
I think it's going to happen. I think we tie them down, force feed them mushrooms, basically. And then
like they do that. Yeah. If you're going to shoot people up with powerful sedatives, then
it could be kind of your own medicine, basically. So you see how, because I think that's the thing, isn't it? When people have experienced the astral plane and have kind of had an out-of-body experience, or been able to dissociate from this normal reality, you realize that we are kind of locked in this prison, basically, mentally, and the construct is not fantastic, the whole 3D world. and you realize there's all these other frequencies and vibrations and things in those vibrations that we just don't even talk about, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
of
there's
course,
so much out there.
we look back to the kind of pyramids and stuff, and again, you can see poppy seeds and all sorts of things depicted on the kind of, on the pyramid walls. And, they were talking about, things, poppies and substance and heroin and stuff right back then, thousands of years ago. And we haven't really got to the same point again yet, really, which is kind of crazy, isn't it? So,
yeah. Hopefully we're on the brink of another psychedelic revolution. And I was introduced to Chariots of the Gods when I was in college, and I followed a lot of Graham Hancock's work, like through Joe Rogan. I was a big Joe Rogan watcher for years, and Graham Hancock, he popped up and put himself out there and was saying, yes, like the evidence is all here and everything's older than we think it is, and can we just have a conversation about it? Can we just question that maybe we don't know?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's quite a good point to kind of probably end this conversation,
Yeah.
really, because we've covered quite a lot of ground, actually, which has been really good. And I've enjoyed the chat. And obviously, what I've enjoyed talking to you is obviously you're coming from a mental health background that you've experienced, rather than people having opinions on it. You've been in there working at the sharp end, and that makes that kind of conversation. And certainly the fact that you're using spirit release therapy as a kind of mechanism to help people and work with your clients, it is a very powerful tool and pointer, really, from our perspective as well, which is good.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to be able to network and work with therapists, licensed practical counselors, and get their clients to do a clearing, and just from them to observe, regardless of where they are on that spectrum of being spiritually in tune or being completely atheist and clinical, just getting the data, right? Is what it comes down
Well,
to.
this is the whole thing, really. I mean, at the end of the day, this is what kind of Dr. Palmer was all about, was let's just do the research. Let's not kind of assume that things do or don't work. Let's just do the research, and the data will speak for itself one way or the other. And that's the key, really, is that we need to get to a point that we do the work, we work with people, we observe the results, and the data then effectively is the kind of, the milestone and the kind of truth indicator, I guess, really.
Right. And now that I think back on it, I think it was probably Dr. Palmer compelling me to sign up for statistics when I was in college. And so I've always been fascinated with that aspect of it, of the, we can do this all day, but until people see verifiable, quantifiable evidence, then they're not going to turn their heads this way. So the data collection, the journalistic aspect of it, of the documentation and the observing and the quantifying of the data, it's all integral parts of it.
Yeah, cool. Well, we need to have a chat with you afterwards, because we have got someone else that's helping us with some of that as well. So we probably need to loop you in to that conversation. We can kind of start to work on creating the data sets that will give us the information that we can then take to the table and actually have conversations with, with the mental health organizations and like you say, people actually practicing mental health in hospitals. And if you're a care worker or a nurse or a clinical physician or a psychiatrist, you need to be talking to us, because we've got some very, very interesting conversations and data. So you would think they'd be knocking the door down to talk with us about what we're experiencing or what we're doing.
I think there's such a separation, though, of like people go to work and they clock in and they're in that environment and in that mode, and then they go home and they clock out and they don't, they're ready to put all that aside and not. So we'll figure it out. We'll get there.
Well, now we've got you on board as the kind of stats, data, journalism. But there's quite a few things there that would be very helpful, really, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay, Alison, that's been a great chat. I will round it up there. Thanks to all you folks for joining and listening, and obviously the people that listen kind of in catch up, which I think more people listen in catch up than live normally, because obviously most people are working during the day, so kind of whilst we're on, they're at work. So the catch up is a really sort of good opportunity for people to listen to some of these podcasts. Now, I used to do it as well. When I used to drive home from work, I would listen to all sorts of podcasts and So it's good that these things are available offline as well, really. So thanks for your time, Alison. It's been a great chat.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Andy. I'd love to come back, and we'll make lots of positive change in the world.
Yeah, definitely. And if you guys are listening and you want to book Alison, her website again is soulsourcesrt.com, and there's a
Yes.
whole host of services, really, by the sound of it, from dream interpretation to SRT, couples clearing. I'm just looking now. You've got quite a lot of services available, basically, which is good. Obviously, corporate SRT, which I quite like the sound of as well. So yeah, head on over to Alison's website, have a look, and get yourself booked in for clearing. And I'll catch you again soon, Alison.
Yes. Thank you, Andy. Love to you all.
Bye-bye.